Parshas Vayakhel-Fikudei. This week's Parsha begins with a couple of sentences that describe the prohibitions of Shabbos, and then goes on to describe at length various aspects of the Mishkan, a subject that the Torah has described before. And here the juxtaposition is informative. Perek Lamed Hey, Pasuk Beis, that's 35:2, reads as follows: Sheshes Yamim Te'aseh Melacha. On 6 days, work shall be done, may be done. Uvayom HaShevi'i Yelachem Kodesh, and on the seventh day there will be holiness, Shabbos, Shabboson Lashem, a extreme cessation from work. Shabbos, Shabboson Lashem, for God. Kol ha'oseh bo malacha yumas. Anyone who does prohibited work on that day will be put to death. Lo savaru eish b'chol mashosechem b'yom Shabbos. And then the Torah specifies one of what we know to be the 39 prohibited categories of activity, and this is kindling a fire on Shabbos. You shall not kindle a fire on anywhere in your dwellings on the day of Shabbos. Okay, so we know that you have to keep Shabbos. Then the Chumash continues. This is now Pasuk Daled, that's verse 4, and introduces Zeh Davar Asher Tziva Hashem Lemor. Moshe says this is the thing that Hashem says, and he goes on to describe taking contributions for the building of the tabernacle of the Mishkan, and a description of the various aspects of the construction of the Mishkan and its craftsmen, and the work begins, and the various components. So I'm back recently from the wedding of our son Yehuda to Suzanne Miller in New York. And as we were assembling for the procession, my new Hutner, Yankel Yoshua Miller, also known as Russell, asks me the following questions. We were talking about various topics in Chumash, and he says he doesn't get it. The keruvim, which we talked about a couple of weeks ago, the keruvim that were on top of the Aron Kodesh, if they were outside the Aron Kodesh, they would be considered graven images, which are prohibited to make. Potentially avodah zarah. It's one of the 10 commandments. How is it that in the Beis HaMikdash you can have graven images, which outside of the Beis HaMikdash you can't? Well, how about this one? In the Beis HaMikdash, even though it says explicitly, Lo savaru eish b'chol mashvosechem, you may not kindle a fire wherever you live, but in the Beis HaMikdash, we bring korbanos on Shabbos. B'yom HaShabbos, shnei chavasim b'nei shana tamimim. We bring 2 sheep as offerings, and there are a lot of malachos, a lot of activities which outside of the Beis HaMikdash are considered prohibited, are prohibited. In the Beis HaMikdash, they're required. You have to shach the behemoth, you have to ritually slaughter, you have to do all kinds of things in preparation, and you have to burn it. Exactly what the Torah says you're not allowed to do outside of the Beis HaMikdash, you're required to do in the Beis HaMikdash. How could that be? We also know, for example, there are several examples of this. We know, for example, that you're not allowed to wear an article of clothing that has a mixture of wool and linen. That's shatnez. Yet, for tzitzis, it's permissible. Why is it? If it's inherently wrong, for whatever reason, whatever the it is that's inherently wrong, why is it permissible, either in the Beis HaMikdash or in the case of shatnez for tzitzis, in the construction of an object for a mitzvah? So if we consider the nature of Shabbos and we consider the nature of the Mikdash, we see that they're very closely intertwined. As a matter of fact, the juxtaposition of Shabbos and the Mishkan teaches us a number of things. One of them is we derive the categories of the 39 prohibited activities for Shabbos from the big categories of activity that were involved in the building of the Mishkan, whether it's plowing to grow materials, to plowing, threshing, seeding, reaping, tanning, coloring, all kinds of things, hotzah, carrying in the public domain. All of these things were done for the Mishkan, and they're prohibited on Shabbos. And not only that, but the juxtaposition also teaches us that we're not allowed to violate the Shabbos for the sake of building the Mishkan. Now, why that is? Why isn't it permissible? If korbanos are permissible, we haven't talked about that yet. But why is it prohibited to engage in these activities in the construction of the Mikdash? So Chaim Dov Keller, in his Sefer Chidekel, suggests that this, based on midrashim of the rabbis, that the building of the Mishkan is a recapitulation of the creation of the world. And just as the Almighty ceased his creative activity when he created the world on the seventh day, so we do that as well. Well, what about korbanos? And why are korbanos, which are offerings that are brought on fire, are burned? Why is that permissible? And one might say that the exclusive nature, the exclusive dedication of that which ordinarily would violate the Shabbos and dedicating it to the Mikdash actually is a recognition of the elevation of that activity on Shabbos, which can't be done elsewhere. We understand this, for example, from the intimate relations between a husband and wife. These are not permitted outside of marriage. Marriage creates the space for these kinds of intimate relations that otherwise are prohibited between a man and a woman. But if the couple is married, it's not only permissible, but it is the bond of the marriage. It's the almost the definition of the marriage, is that this couple is permitted to each other. The concept extends to tznius, to modest dress, and the concept also extends to the bringing of and the burning of offerings in the Beis HaMikdash. It's prohibited everywhere else, but not in the Mikdash, because in the Mikdash it is a special dedication to the Almighty. How about the Keruvim? The Keruvim, which, as Yankel, my Hutner, points out, outside of the Beis HaMikdash, outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, would be considered graven objects that are prohibited. Nevertheless, inside the Mikdash, the power, the attractiveness of the attraction of the Keruvim, that which renders the aura, whatever it is, that renders graven images prohibited because they attract worship in the Beis HaMikdash. It enhances worship. Not that we worship the Keruvim. Most of the time, the Keruvim are not even visible. As we mentioned in a previous lesson, the Talmud says that when the children of Israel would go up to the temple, to the Beis HaMikdash, for the holidays, the Kohen would draw open the curtain so that they could see the Keruvim. And when the children of Israel were doing the will of God, the Keruvim were embracing, just like a married couple does. The nature of Shabbos, the power of Shabbos, is pervasive. In fact, when the Medrash says, or rather when the Torah says that HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that the Almighty created the world, Vayakhel-Fikudei, es yom ha-shavi'i, and he blessed the seventh day, Vayakhel-Fikudei, and he sanctified it. So the Medrash says, Parshas Rabbah, this is Yud Aleph Beis 11:12. Parshas Rabbah says, Vayivorech oso. It says, Be'eracho ba'or panav shel adam. He blessed Shabbos with the radiance of man's face, of men's face, of people's faces on Shabbos. The faces of people who observe Shabbos are different from the faces of people who are not observing Shabbos. The quality of the sanctity of Shabbos gets infused within our being, and it's reflected in our faces. This might answer, says the Sfas Emes. In fact, the Sfas Emes says this does answer the question about why we don't need panim chadoshos for Sheva Brachos on Shabbos. Why, when we host Sheva Brachos for our children this Shabbos, we might have, but we won't need anyone who has not been at the wedding. Why? The general rule is when you have Sheva Brachos, which are the celebrations marked by 7 separate blessings on the rejoicing of the union of the new husband and wife, the new couple, that after the wedding, to express all of those 7 blessings, you need to have a new person there. Why? Because that new person creates a locus of rejoicing because of his newness. When somebody new walks in, the immediate response is, oh, I've got to tell you about the wedding, or how was the wedding? And there's a discussion about the wedding. And there's just an enjoyment, an enhanced enjoyment that's brought about by somebody new at the party. On Shabbos, you don't need it. Why? Because we're all new. We're all new at the party on Shabbos. Rav Hutner even points out that we actually say Sheva Brachos every Shabbos. It's a separate concept, but it's an intriguing one, which is that the Shemona Esrei, which is typically 18 or actually nowadays 19 blessings, the central prayer, the Amidah, on Shabbos is reduced to 7. And even on Friday night, when we have a mini repetition of the Shemona Esrei, it's called the bracha Achas Me'ein Sheva. It's one bracha, but it is a condensation of the Sheva brachos. On Shabbos, we are infused with newness, with radiance, with or panim, with the radiance of our faces. We no longer need any extraneous panim chadoshos, new faces to walk in to enhance our simcha, to enhance our joy, because our joy is already enhanced by the very Shabbos that we are observing. Have a good Shabbos.